There's a moment Temple Grandin has documented hundreds of times while designing livestock facilities. A cow moves calmly through a chute toward a corner it can't see around. Then, for no visible reason, it stops, plants its feet, refuses to go further. Almost always at the exact same point. Same point where the animal ahead of it showed acute distress minutes earlier. Does that cow know what's at the end of the chute? Does it understand, in any sense we'd recognize, that this is where animals like it become something else? Or is it reading something much narrower than that, and stopping anyway? That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. By the end of this video, I want to tell you about Norman, a rescued pig who spent 2 years on a commercial farm before going to a sanctuary, and what happened to his behavior in the months after he left. But first, we need to ask what understanding you are food would actually require, because it's a much higher bar than most people assume. To genuinely know you are food for another species, you need something specific. You need a model of the future, not just remembering the past, projecting forward to an event you haven't experienced yet and understanding your own role in it. You also need a model of another species' intentions toward you, specifically, not "this hurts." Something closer to "this exists in order to consume me." That's not a small cognitive ask. It's the kind of abstract, symbolic, future-facing thought that researchers usually reserve for discussing human-level cognition. No farm animal has ever demonstrated anything close to that, not in a controlled study, not in decades of behavioral research, which could mean the answer to this video's title is simply no, except that's not quite where the evidence actually lands. Here's what Temple Grandin's decades of observation actually point to. Cattle and pigs have a well-documented capacity for something called associative fear learning. If a specific location, sound, or smell reliably precedes another animal's acute distress, the next animal in line picks that up, fast, often after a single exposure. This isn't abstract reasoning. It's closer to classical conditioning. Smell plus distress equals danger here. Nothing more symbolic than that. There's also a documented chemical signal at play. Many animals release detectable alarm compounds under acute stress. Other animals nearby pick up on those compounds and shift into heightened vigilance, even with zero visual information. So the cow at the chute isn't reading a future. It's reading a smell, a specific, immediate, present tense signal that something went wrong here very recently to something just like me. That's enough to produce real fear behavior, balking, stress vocalizing, elevated heart rate. It's just not enough to produce the concept of being food. Here's where this video stops being about animals for a minute, because there's a second blind spot in this story, and it isn't theirs. In 2012, psychologists Brock Bastian and Steve Lochnan ran a study that's been replicated several times since. They showed people the exact same animal, described identically except for one detail. Some participants were told the animal would be used for food. Others were told it wouldn't. The people told the animal would be eaten rated it as having significantly less capacity to think, plan, or suffer. Same animal, same facts, just a different label. Researchers call this denial of mind, and it isn't random. It happens specifically, reliably, only when an animal has been mentally filed under food. Psychologists call the broader pattern the meat paradox. Most people genuinely care about animal welfare. Most people also eat meat. Holding both at once creates a quiet discomfort, and the mind resolves that discomfort by lowering, slightly and automatically, how much mind it grants the animal in question. The cow doesn't have a concept of being food. It turns out we might be the ones managing one. If that distinction just changed how you think about something you've never really had to think about before, that's exactly what this channel does every single week. So go ahead and subscribe now, because the next video does the same thing to a question you definitely think you already know the answer to. Norman spent his first 2 years on a commercial farm. When he arrived at the sanctuary, staff documented a long list of fear responses tied to very specific cues, certain metallic sounds, certain narrow walkways, the smell of particular cleaning agents used in processing environments. Outside of those exact triggers, Norman showed none of it. No generalized dread, no behavior suggesting he understood his original purpose, his future at the time, or what almost happened to him. Within 18 months, most of those specific fear responses faded entirely. Caretakers could walk him past machinery, through narrow gates, near the smells that once made him bolt. Nothing happened, because there was never an abstract fear to begin with. There was only ever a very precise, very narrow, very learnable one. So does the cow at the chute know it's about to become food? No. Not in any sense that requires a concept of food, or a future or another species' intentions. What it knows is narrower and, in its own way, more honest. Something happened here, recently, to something like me. That's enough to be afraid. It was never going to be enough to understand why. The species in this story running the more sophisticated trick isn't the one in the chute. It's the one that built a word specifically, so it wouldn't have to think too hard about what's standing in it.